Imagine you have a neighbor you absolutely cannot stand. Now imagine you've already beaten him up twice, stolen his wallet, kidnapped his elephants, and made him pay your rent for 50 years. But, and here's the kicker, he still has a nicer view of the Mediterranean than you. Welcome to 149 BC. Rome has decided that Carthage, a city that has effectively been neutered for half a century, is still a threat. Mostly because an old guy named Cato wouldn't stop ending his speeches with "Carthage must be destroyed," even when the speech was about sewer maintenance. So, Rome starts the Third Punic War. But here's the embarrassing part. Rome kinda sucks at it. For 2 whole years, a succession of incompetent Roman consuls try to breach the walls of Carthage and fail miserably. The Roman army is less highly disciplined killing machine and more frat house on a gap year. Discipline is non-existent, soldiers are trading swords for snacks, and the Carthaginians are actually, dare we say it, winning. Enter Scipio Aemilianus. He's got the golden name, he's the adopted grandson of Scipio Africanus, the guy who beat Hannibal. He's technically too young to be consul, and he wasn't even running for the job, but the Roman people look at the dumpster fire in North Africa and say, rules are for losers, you're hired. Scipio arrives in Africa in 147 BC and immediately ruins everyone's fun. He kicks out the camp followers, bans the sale of luxury goods, and tells the legionaries that the vacation is over. His plan isn't just to poke the walls, it's to strangle the city. He builds a massive line of fortifications to cut Carthage off from the land. But Carthage is a port city, right? They can just get Uber Eats delivered by boat. Not if Scipio has anything to say about it. He decides to do something insane. He builds a massive mole, a giant stone wall, right across the harbor entrance. He is literally trying to delete the ocean. Inside the city, things are getting grim. The defender, Hasdrubal the Boetharch, has taken control. And by taken control, I mean he's wearing a purple cape and eating huge feasts while his people starve. Classic dictator move. The noose is tightening. The fun and games are over. Rome is done knocking. Now, they're ready to kick the door in. Scipio looks at his massive rock wall blocking the harbor and dusts off his hands. "Well, boys," he says, "that's a wrap on imports. Hope they like eating drywall." The Roman army relaxes. They assume the Carthaginians are inside crying and writing sad poetry about the good old days. But the Carthaginians have zero chill. Trapped like rats, they decide to become burrowing rats. In absolute secrecy, the citizens, men, women, and children start digging a brand new channel out the other side of the harbor. At the same time, they start building a brand new navy. And since they don't have lumber yards, they use everything else. Dining tables, now a hull. Granddad's rocking chair, that's a rudder. 2 months later, the Romans are chilling. Suddenly, crash the wall on the east side of the harbor explodes outwards. The Romans drop their frisbees. Out sails a brand new Carthaginian fleet of 50 triremes. It's the greatest surprise mother-lover moment in naval history. The Roman fleet is unmanned, unready, and vulnerable. If the Carthaginians attack now, they can burn the entire Roman navy and save their city. It's the perfect moment. Victory is right there. So, what do? They decide to just sail around for a bit, show off the new boats, maybe do a few donuts in the water to flex. Then they go back inside to have lunch. I am not making this up. They literally stage a boat parade and go home. By the time they come back out the next day, Scipio has put his soldiers on the ships, and the element of surprise is deader than the dodo. The subsequent naval battle is a messy, grinding disaster. Carthage loses its shiny new IKEA fleet. The blockade holds. The noose isn't just tight, it's choking the life out of them. With the harbor blocked and the surprise fleet turned into driftwood, Scipio decides to stop playing 4D chess and start playing whack-a-mole. He focuses his attack on the quay, the commercial loading dock. He brings up the heavy artillery, massive battering rams and siege towers that cost more than the GDP of a small province. The Carthaginians see these monster machines rolling up and realize they have exactly one night before their walls get turned into gravel. So, they come up with a plan that is equal parts brave and absolutely insane. A group of Carthaginian soldiers strips down, grabs some unlit torches, and decides to go for a midnight dip. They wade through the water, dodging Roman patrols, climb onto the expensive Roman siege engines, light their torches, and set the whole thing on fire. It is the most effective use of a swim team in military history. The Romans wake up to a bonfire that used to be their siege train. It's a humiliating setback for Scipio, who now has to explain to the Senate why his expensive war machines were destroyed by a bunch of wet, naked guys. But Scipio has something Carthage doesn't: infinite resources. He just builds them again. And this time, he guards them. Rome hammers the harbor wall. Thud, thud, crack. A breach opens. The Romans pour onto the quay. The outer shell of Carthage has cracked. The legions are technically in the city, but they aren't in the houses yet. They are standing in the ancient equivalent of the parking lot. But the way is open. The real horror show is about to begin. By the spring of 146 BC, Scipio has secured the harbor area and the agora, the main marketplace. The Romans are high-fiving, looting souvenir keychains, and thinking, "We did it. Time for the victory parade." But Scipio knows better. You see, Carthage isn't flat. It's built like a wedding cake of doom, rising up to a central citadel called the Bursa. To get there, the Romans have to march up 3 main streets. But these aren't nice wide boulevards. They are narrow, steep, and lined with 6-story apartment buildings. This is where the battle stops being a battle and starts being a horror movie. Every single house is a fortress. Every window is an arrow slit. Every rooftop is a launch pad for rocks, tiles, and boiling unpleasantness. The Carthaginians aren't fighting for a flag anymore. They are fighting for their lives, their families, and their right to not be stabbed by a guy named Gaius. Scipio realizes he can't just march up the street without his men getting turned into pincushions. He has to clear the buildings, one by one. The order is given: go inside, kill everyone, jump to the next roof, repeat. It's parkour, but with murder. The Romans take a deep breath, tighten their sandals, and step into the meat grinder. The 6 days of destruction have begun. The battle for the Byarsa isn't a military engagement. It's a vertical nightmare. Carthage's apartment blocks are 6 stories high skyscrapers by ancient standards, and the Romans have to clear them floor by agonized floor. Because the streets are essentially canyons of death where people throw rocks on your head, the Romans decide the safest place to be is on the roof. They lay wooden planks across the narrow alleyways to bridge the gaps between buildings. It's the world's highest stakes game of the floor is lava, except the floor is actually 60 feet down, and the lava is angry Carthaginians with spears. The fighting is savage. We're talking hand-to-hand combat in kitchens, bedrooms, and closets. Legionaries are stabbing people while trying not to knock over the fine china. It's exhausting work. The squads fight in shifts, swapping out tired murderers for fresh ones, while Scipio Aemilianus stands at the bottom of the hill, watching the slow, grinding progress. But Scipio is a man with a schedule, and house-to-house genocide is taking way too long. He checks his sundial. He sighs. He decides to hit the fast-forward button. He orders his men to stop capturing the buildings and just start burning them. The order goes out: burn it all. The fire spreads instantly, turning the narrow streets into ovens. But this creates a new problem. The rubble from the collapsing 6-story buildings needs to go somewhere. And unfortunately for everyone involved, gravity exists. As the 6-story apartment blocks come crashing down, the narrow streets of Carthage stop looking like streets and start looking like a jagged mountain range of burning timber and stone. This is a logistical nightmare for Scipio. You can't march a legion in formation over a pile of burning garbage. So, Scipio orders the cleanup crew to move in. He needs a flat path for his cavalry and reinforcements to reach the top of the citadel. The order is simple: make it flat. I don't care how. And when a Roman general says, "I don't care how," things usually get incredibly dark, incredibly fast. The soldiers start dragging the rubble into the pits and hollows to level the road. But here's the thing about those collapsed buildings: they weren't empty. They were full of hiding civilians, wounded soldiers, and people too old to run. When the buildings fell, these people fell with them. The history books, specifically our guy Appian, tell us that the Romans didn't pause to check for a pulse. Dead bodies, injured people, and terrified survivors are all treated as road fill. The soldiers toss them into the holes, along with the stones and beams. It is brutal, efficient, and horrifying. Cavalry horses gallop over the newly flattened street, crushing whatever and whoever lies beneath. It is a literal highway of death. Scipio has built his path to the top, but he paved it with the population of Carthage. The road to the Bursa is open. The final boss fight is just around the corner. On the 7th day, the fires finally die down. The smoke clears, and Scipio finds himself standing at the gates of the Bursa, the final citadel. He knocks politely. by which I mean he surrounds it with thousands of angry legionaries sharpening their swords. The Carthaginians inside realize that the fighting to the death thing sounds cool in songs, but in practice, it's actually quite painful. They offer to surrender. Scipio, feeling generous and probably tired of the smell of burning timber, agrees to spare their lives. What happens next is like a clown car act gone wrong. From this one citadel, 50,000 men, women, and children pour out. It is an endless stream of misery. 50,000, that's a sold-out football stadium squeezed into a fortress. They are granted the mercy of not being killed, which in Roman terms means they are immediately shackled and sold into slavery. But not everyone surrenders. There's a small group left who literally cannot give up. These are the Roman deserters, guys who switch sides to fight for Carthage. They know exactly what Scipio does to traitors, and it involves crosses, nails, and 0 painkillers. Beside them stands Hasdrubal, the Carthaginian commander. He's told everyone he will die fighting for his city. He's pumping his chest, he looks heroic. Spoiler alert, Hasdrubal is lying. The 900 Roman deserters are holed up in the Temple of Eshmun at the very top of the citadel. They know there is no mercy coming. Scipio has a very strict no returns policy on traitors. They prepare to fight to the last drop of blood, looking to their fearless leader, Hasdrubal, for inspiration. In a move that would make a cartoon villain blush, Hasdrubal sneaks out of the temple, abandons his soldiers, abandons his own wife and children, and runs straight to Scipio. He throws himself at the Roman general's feet, clutching his knees and begging for his life. It is the most pathetic display of cowardice since the last time a Carthaginian general surrendered. The Roman deserters inside the temple see their hero groveling outside. They realize they've been duped. In a rage, they decide that if they're going to hell, they're taking the temple with them. They set the building on fire. But then, amidst the flames, a figure appears on the roof. It's Mrs. Hasdrubal, and she has the microphone. She looks down at Scipio and shouts, "I wish you no harm, Roman. You are just doing your job." Then she turns her gaze to her husband, who is still cowering on the ground like a frightened spaniel, and she absolutely roasts him. "Enjoy your life, coward," she screams, "but know that I am dying with honor." And then, to ensure Hasdrubal never gets a good night's sleep for the rest of his miserable life, she throws her children into the fire and jumps in after them. Hasdrubal survives. He gets to live out his days as a wealthy pet prisoner in Italy, but his dignity, that burned up in the temple. The fighting is over. The screaming has stopped. The only sound left is the crackling of the fire consuming a city that stood for 700 years. It is the absolute pinnacle of Roman military achievement. It's the moment every Roman general dreams of. Total victory. Time to pop the champagne, spike the football, and do a victory dance, right? Wrong. Scipio Aemilianus is not dancing. He stands on a hill overlooking the Inferno and he starts crying? Yep. The toughest man in the Mediterranean, the destroyer of nations, is bawling his eyes out like he just watched the end of Titanic. Polybius, the Greek historian who is basically tagging along to write Scipio's biography, asks the obvious question, boss, we won, why the waterworks? Scipio turns to him, grips his hand dramatically, and drops the most heavy metal quote in ancient history. He quotes the Iliad because nothing says "I'm educated" like quoting Homer while a city burns. He says, "A day will come when sacred Troy shall perish, and Priam and his people shall be slain." Polybius is stunned. "Wait," he says, "are you talking about us?" And Scipio nods. In the flames of Carthage, he sees the future of Rome. He realizes that all empires, Assyria, Persia, Macedon, Carthage, eventually fall. And one day, the barbarians will come for Rome too. It is a moment of profound existential dread in the middle of a war zone. While his soldiers are looting gold and celebrating, Scipio is having a midlife crisis about the cyclic nature of history. He knows that today he is the hammer, but tomorrow, Rome will be the nail. The fire burns for 17 days. When the flames finally die out, Scipio orders the ruins to be leveled. And I don't mean knocked down a bit, I mean erased. The Roman army spends the next few weeks playing extreme landscaping, turning one of the greatest metropolises in human history into a flat, dusty field. Now, you've probably heard the story. You know the one, that the Romans were so petty, so vindictive, that they plowed the earth and sowed it with salt so nothing would ever grow there again. Yeah, that didn't happen. Salt was expensive back then. Salting an entire city would have bankrupted the Roman treasury. That story was actually made up by historians in the 19th century who clearly didn't understand how budgets work. However, Scipio did curse the ground. He pronounced a solemn anathema on the site, forbidding anyone from ever rebuilding on top of the bursa. And so, after 118 years, 3 massive wars, and millions of dead bodies, the rivalry is over. Carthage is gone, deleted, control plus alt plus destroyed. Rome is no longer just a powerful republic. It is the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. The Punic curse has been lifted. Rome has defeated its greatest enemy. There is no one left to challenge them, no one left to fight, which is great news. Unless, of course, you know anything about Romans. Because when Romans run out of enemies to fight abroad, they start looking at each other. But that is a story for another time.